back, everyone, to another episode of the Kingdom REI podcast. Man, I love this show. I love getting to share the stories of kingdom-minded entrepreneurs who are just doing, honestly, really cool stuff in the real estate industry, and doing it profitably, which I think is something that often is not celebrated enough. Cameron, by the way, welcome to the show again. Cameron, how are you?
Thanks, my brother. I am very good. How about yourself today?
Man, I'm pumped for this show, dude. And what I was saying though, and like what I love about our guest today is they figured out a vehicle through real estate investing that allows them to support the things that they're passionate about, aka anti-human trafficking. And the reason I love that so much because I remember what it was like, dude, to be a missionary, and I would have died for a guest. I literally was dying. I would have lived, or I would have done a lot for a guest who, like ours today, who had a passion to support our ministry through an entrepreneurial vehicle like real estate investing. So this is going to be a fabulous episode. So without further ado, guys, I want to introduce our guest to you today, Mr. Tyler Goble. How are you, sir?
Ellis, I'm wonderful. Cameron, it's good to meet you, brother. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Likewise, man. Happy to have you here.
Tyler, give our audience, man, a little intro to yourself, where you guys are at. You know, I know that you got a lot going on. You have the business, you served in the military or serving in the military. Give us a little background.
Yeah, so I mean, the Reader's Digest version basically is growing up as a kid, I'd never thought that I would join the military, do anything like that. Don't have really any family in the military. I have an uncle who actually was in the Army for 30 years, but other than that, the Gobles were like a sports family, right? And so I went to.
By the way, if you're not, Tyler's like literally jacked. So I'm not sure if that was because he comes from a sports family or because he was a Marine. But keep going.
I've been lifting since January. Finally got back in the routine, so I appreciate that. But yeah. So my whole dream, my whole life was to play college football, and so really what led me into the military was a desire to play college football at the highest level I could. And the highest level I could play was actually the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And so played football for 4 years, and the academies kind of got a weird way of molding your mind at some point and making you realize, you know what, military service wouldn't be that bad. Kind of the conditions for me going to the academy with my mom were, okay, you're not going to join the Marine Corps. There's no way you're going to do something like that. And I mean, if you join the Marine Corps, you're definitely not going to go into the infantry. Like that would be insane. Like you're going to get on a ship, you're going to do your 5-year commitment, and that'll be that. I think Lord had different plans for me. And so I ended up joining the Marine Corps and then going into the infantry for the past 4 years. So I kind of did a whole hard right turn from what we thought I was going to do as an 18-year-old kid, just going to college to play ball. Ended up kind of serving the country in that way. And so that's kind of my background there. But as far as the investing side goes,
you got me now, man. Hooked. Now I'm hooked now. Like, how does a guy call one into Marine infantry duty? Tell me how that kind of shifted.
Football, I'd played since I was 7 years old, right? And I don't know if you guys have a sports background or anything like that, but loved the game, was a huge part of my life.
Dude's a athletic
specimen.
He's a poster boy for athleticism.
No. Not at all. You're lying, brother.
I don't buy it. I bet you could dunk. Anyways, it was always football was my driving force, right? Like my faith, and then football was the thing that I loved. Having that get severed as abruptly as it does, unless you go to the NFL and you're Tom Brady and you come back whenever you want, is something that you're like, man, what am I going to do after this is done? Like, what am I going to fill that with? Like we're all Christians here. This is a Christian podcast. It wasn't something where I had like a crisis of my faith, but I knew myself enough to know it's like I need to be around a team. I needed to be around folks that are aggressive, want to get after it, and kind of wanted to find that locker room atmosphere again, right? And so, I mean, the best way to do that is the Marine Corps, and the best way inside the Marine Corps is the infantry. And so that's where I really felt God kind of pulling on me to serve in that way. And so that's kind of how I landed in that world.
Mel, before we jump into your real estate experience, kind of what you're doing in this space, can I just pray for us before we get going?
Yeah, it'd be great.
With that in mind, God, thank you that you are a God who really cares, who sees us, who wants to call us, God, into good works and be a part of what you're doing. Thank you that because of Christ, we have the opportunity to be partners with you in your mission to glorify your name, to let others know of your love, your care for us. Pray that today would increase our faith. It would set our hearts on fire for mission. And so we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Give us your focus today, man, with what you guys are doing at your company.
Kind of to get to that, I think it's helpful to go back and like establish okay, where we started with real estate. It was kind of the very traditional buy a single family home, rent out the rooms to your friends, pay for your living expenses that way. And so I got married to my wife in 2019. And when we got married, I had previously bought a house, was renting it out to 4 other buddies, and she didn't want to live in that house with 4 other grown men, right? And so we ended up buying another house and living in that. And fast forward now to 2020, I left an infantry battalion, got a new set of orders out here to Monterey, California. And my wife and I, kind of newly married, were wanting to decide how we were going to be generous with our real estate portfolio type stuff. We always thought that real estate was going to be a pretty big part of what we're doing, but hadn't decided because of the nature of income. You guys are super familiar, if you're flipping houses, it comes in waves, right? Like you'll get a $30,000 check, you get a $40,000 check. It's not like you're getting every 2 weeks a paycheck. And so we were wanting to figure out what we wanted to donate and tithe from that income with. My wife suggested giving to Unbound Now, which is an anti-human trafficking nonprofit that my mother-in-law runs. I didn't know if she was running this thing out of her garage on her laptop and just like sending messages to folks, or like what kind of scale this operation was. But I mean, at the time of this recording that we're recording this podcast right now, she's actually in Ukraine right now, helping refugees stay safe from human trafficking, educating them. Because I mean, there's a huge issue, right? Like you've got a ton of folks moving across the border. There are some good people out there that are helping transport them and get them to somewhere safe. But with every good person, there's usually somebody who's got kind of an ulterior motive. And I mean, in Ukraine, if you're a man, you're staying and you're fighting, right? And so the people that are getting moved across the border right now are usually women and children, or really elderly folks. And so they're really at high risk. And so she's actually over there right now doing that work. But wow. Going back in time to when we first sold our first couple properties in North Carolina is where I bought them. We just gave the money to Unbound. We're like, this is a good thing to do. Newly married, like established, like we're going to be generous with what God's given us. And my mother-in-law called us and was like, hey guys, like, thank you guys so much. I think we were able to end up giving like $2,500 or something like that to Unbound. She explained to us, was like, for $5,000, we're able to employ a full-time worker that works in countries like Mongolia, Indonesia, Thailand, those types of places, and just sits on the border between Mongolia and China and is just snatching people that are being sold into slavery at these bus stations, truck stops, all those different things. There's been some pretty good publicity. If you listen to like Jordan Peterson podcasts or any of those more like pretty high level folks like Joe Rogan talking about where North Korean defectors are coming across into China and being sold into slavery, or going into Mongolia and then being sold into slavery, right? Being in the Marine Corps, we have a pretty unique outlook, I think, on China compared to most folks, right? We kind of see behind the curtain in some ways. And so when she said that, that was kind of my light bulb moment of like, man, like, I know that's a huge problem. If flipping one house could pay for 6 months of somebody's salary, like, man, like, what are we doing? Like, let's flip a house. Like, there's no, like, that's not a big deal. And I don't know if you guys have read that children's book of like, you give a mouse a cookie, it's going to ask for some milk. You flip one house, it's like, okay, you did a ton of work to flip one house. It's like, you've already made the relationship with contractors, the banks, all those different things. It's like, you might as well flip 2 houses. And so you get, well, if you're going to flip 2, you might as well flip 3. It's like, okay, well, if you're flipping 3 houses, like, you might as well turn this thing into a full-fledged business. And so that's kind of what we decided to do. And so since January of 2021 is when we officially launched the company, but June is when we started actually purchasing properties in Waco, Texas. Since June of last year, we bought 13 single-family homes, and we're in the process of flipping the majority of those. Our dream had always been to donate a full house to Unbound and be able to do something where it's like, man, they have a huge need for temporary housing for victims of trafficking, right? And throughout Central Texas. One of our general contractors actually beat us to the punch. And so he donated a full house to Unbound. That's going to be one of the first like emergency shelters for female victims of trafficking in the foster care system, which, if you know anything about trafficking, that's kind of one of the high risk demographics. Right now, in addition to those, I think we've got 10 on our books right now, flips that we're currently in construction on or selling or in various stages. My wife she's an interior architect. And so she's doing all the design work, and we're trying to help raise a little bit of money to help pay that house completely off. But yeah, that's us in a nutshell. That's kind of where we're moving to fire hose method there, explaining a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. I just love the family mission. I love that you guys, it's clear that you really understand and are very intimately involved clearly in anti trafficking and have built a business to support that passion. And I just think, man, that's the power and the purpose of a profitable business. Like why I think margin is not the enemy. It actually is a tremendous reason why I think we should clearly be focused on profit when it comes to business. And what do we do with profit, right? I mean, and I think that's such an amazing example. So, really cool, really just cool testimony, man. I hope that really speaks to a lot of people. The fact that you have a real vision for what you know how what God's called you to participate with Him. And maybe instead of saying, "Hey, I'm going to go work for Unbound," I think that was the name of it, right? Unbound, you're an entrepreneur and you went into real estate. And I just think that's what's so cool to me, man, is just see the way the kingdom and the way the strengths and gifts that God's given us, the way He can use us in so many different ways for the advancement of His kingdom.
What's really funny, I think you guys will appreciate this, is we thought we were setting some really big goals. Like we were like, man, let's try and do 4 houses this year. Like first year of business, like let's try and take it slow and let's do 4 houses and really be smart about this thing. And then God just kind of grabbed it and said, no, I think you're going to do a little bit more than that. And I mean, that's 3 times what we're really planning on doing at 13 houses at this point, like already having a house get donated to Unbound. And it's been a really, really cool way our faith has been stretched. Like I'll tell people all the time, like I've probably talked more about Jesus in the past 2 years because of real estate investing than I had my whole life, you know, because I think the draw for people is everybody wants to make money. And if you're in real estate, you're in marketing. And if you're in marketing, you're talking to a bunch of people. It's like you lock me in a Zoom call with somebody and it's like inevitably the question that you kind of opened up with is like, why are you guys doing what you're doing? That comes up and it's like, well, we're doing it because of the gospel, right? Like at the end of the day, trafficking is kind of the focal point for why all this stuff is why we launched the business. That's kind of the outgrowth of the work. But at the end of the day, it's all because of Christ. And so that's something I think that's super
Like,
cool.
how do you connect that? And I just think this would be helpful to just kind of continue to see how the gospel applies to everyday living. What do you mean because of Christ? Like, how does Christ have anything to do with anti-trafficking? Has anything to do with real estate investing?
Yeah, because I mean, I think you make a really good point when you talk about how profit's not the enemy, right? Because I mean, the Bible talks all the time about debt. And I mean, I love debt. Like, and I'm pretty sure you probably love debt too, being in real estate, like lever up, like let's do it. But at the same time, there needs to be a healthy understanding of like, if you don't have that margin, you don't have any room to be generous. Like you don't have any kind of ability to give if you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you don't have the ability to, you know what, we made $30,000 on this last flip. Yeah, we're going to give some of it in our normal tithe, but here's a need that's direct right now. If we hadn't done that flip, we wouldn't have the money to give to that cause, right? I think margin and being able to be generous is a big deal. But as far as how does it tie back to the gospel, I think real estate and really single family residential flips are super restorative for communities. Like multiple of our houses that we've sold at this point have gone to first time home buyers with kids. They're getting to live in a really safe place. Their house is put together the right way. I think there's a lot of flippers out there that are just cutting corners and painting over stuff, but we really try to not do that. And I think that's kind of a way to model the gospel in a secular world where God's not painting over stuff, right? Like he's not going out there and doing a halfway job on anyone, right? And he really proved it, and he really put his money where his mouth was on the cross, right? Like God was willing to put in the work in that way. And it's not a perfect analogy, but I just think the gospel and business are really intertwined. And I think your point of having margin is a great way to show folks that like God loves them and that there's people out there that care about them, even though they haven't met them.
I'm curious, Tyler, just because I live in Dallas and I'm here in Texas, how in the world you guys decided to land in Waco? Because it has the absolute worst of the worst traffic in America. You drive to downtown Waco, it's a trip.
Yep.
You don't get to speed through it. They make you go 5 miles an hour through the entire city. Granted, I know it's grown and exploded since Chip and Joanna Gaines repopularized it from the, pretty sad past it had. But I mean, what drew you to Waco?
Well, that's where Unbound is headquartered.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
That makes a really, really good slam dunk for us. But another crazy thing is the master's program I'm in is like a data analysis, data analytics master's program. It's like data science. And it's just insane what's happening right now in Texas, and in particular, Dallas and Austin and Houston. In my mind, though, there's one common denominator between those three big cities, and it's Waco. If you look at it on a map, I mean, you're talking about I-35, you're an hour and a half from both of those major metroplexes, you're 3 hours from Houston. And I think we've seen the mass migration out of cities into those tertiary markets that you can still get to. You can still get to Dallas from Waco. You can still get to Austin from Waco. And I've nerded out hardcore. That's probably a whole nother discussion, but plotted on a map where everyone has actually moved across in the United States over these past couple of years. And I mean, you want to look at Dallas, it's like somebody dropped a hand grenade right in Dallas County, and it's just blossoming out. And that's what's happening in a lot of major cities across the US right now. Hopefully this doesn't get out to the entire world, but man, I think Waco is going to be the next Austin in the next 5 to 10 years.
Whoa.
Well, it will now that you just said it on this podcast.
I know the whole world knows, but I mean, you look at where people are moving, right? You hear all these different, like, look at the U-Haul reports and look at all that stuff. But if you look at the census data, you look at all those different population demographics and you put it on a map, people aren't necessarily moving right into the cities. They're moving to those counties that are commutable, especially in Central Texas. And so there's a huge draw for us to pick Waco to answer your question. One, for Unbound, but two, I just think it's a place where we're kind of getting in. I wish we had gotten in 10 years ago, to be honest with you. The market, I think, is primed to really just take off even more so. But then kind of tying it back in holistically, the way my wife and I view this business is, one, it's a revenue generator. It's something to make a whole lot of money that we are in charge of, with multifamily syndication and those different types of things that require you to onboard like 35, 40 investors for one deal. You have a responsibility to those folks to pay them back and to pay them a highest return you can. While I don't think that's a terrible like investment thing, I mean, we're going to probably get into some multifamily and get into some commercial real estate here in the next couple of years. What we really wanted to do at the beginning here of our business was have a little bit more control and really have control over where we direct those finances. Single family flipping in Waco kind of meets that criteria. But with the business, we kind of envision it, one, the revenue generator there, but two, it's a marketing machine. And what better way to like draw attention to Unbound than flip houses where Chip and Joanna Gaines are, right? It's a really easy connection, connect the dots for folks to kind of understand that. And right or wrong, that's kind of how we thought about it, at least. And so that's what we pushed the accelerator on in Waco.
So walk me through, or walk my guests through, like, your process. I mean, let's just say I'm listening to this show, and let's speak to someone who, man, is not being able to create enough profit or margin to be able to support the things they want to support. Maybe it's same where you were before you flipped your business. So like, what is required if someone says, man, I want to go do something similar to this? It seems like if you can do it, it could be possible for others. Just, I mean, I guess high level, or as simplistic as you can, talk about the team and the systems that have allowed you to live in California, but flip houses in Waco.
Yeah. So,
How would you go about building that in a different market?
I think what you really have to do is you have to have somebody that you trust in the market you're in. You've got to have, if you're flipping single family homes, it's not done until your partner sees it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not like, that didn't get painted until your partner put their eyeballs on that paint. My father-in-law is actually our 50-50 partner on all of our deals. There's no trust greater than your father-in-law, right? So we've got somebody on the ground there that we know and trust that is going to shoot us straight, whether it's good or bad. We've already, I mean, flipping houses is kind of like the Wild West sometimes. And we've already had hard conversations of, hey man, like this one looks like we're going way over budget. How will we fix it? And so having that team in place where you have someone on the ground that you know and trust, doesn't have to be related to you, but they need to actually care and have a vested interest in what's going on. So that's kind of step number one, in my opinion. Step number two is getting those contractors together which we really rely on my father-in-law to do all that stuff too. And so your boots on the ground person, if they can handle the construction, everything else can be done via the internet. Like I'm signing for a house we're buying tomorrow, mobile notary, and it's easy. I mean, there's no rocket science behind it. All the financing stuff can be taken care of
And what
online.
about deal flow?
Yeah, deal flow. So there's a couple different strategies for that. What we've decided to do is we don't do any marketing for deals ourselves right now. What we've decided to do is just go after folks that are doing the marketing. And so we hunt down wholesalers, real estate agents, and answer pretty much every time somebody says, hey, I've got off market properties. Like I'm probably on some wholesale companies list like 5 times because I've always ping them. But that's what we found has been the most effective thing. And once you kind of break the ice and become a known quantity in your market, so once you buy 1 or 2 properties and people understand that you're gonna be able to close, we found that we'll get deals sent to us before they get marketed to everyone else. So kind of at this point, our deal funnel fills up every week. We're probably making 3 or 4 offers a week, and we're getting ready to bring on some full-time help as well to kind of help us with scaling that.
And what about your capital?
Our capital is all private money. Friends, family, although no family's actually invested with us. It's all been folks that I've connected with via LinkedIn, via podcasts like this, and really just being genuine and that kind of thing. So all of our investors are usually it's like private money lending situation, which I'd be happy to discuss exactly how we structure that stuff.
Yeah,
if that's
people want to
helpful.
know, what do you offer them? What does that look like? I'd love. I mean, people might want to do this. So how do you work it?
What's really important is it's very state specific for lending laws. And so there's people out there that'll do deals, draw up on the back of a napkin a promissory note, which is like, I think a pretty bad way to do it. Like we have a real estate attorney that we've worked with in Waco that has drawn up Texas is a deed of trust state. So you have kind of 2 different things, deed of trust or mortgage. Texas is a deed of trust state. And so what we do is we'll find a property, we'll get it under contract, we'll figure out how much money we need, like a capital side from an investor. And then we offer 10% and 1 point of whatever that loan amount is. So for easy numbers, if we needed $100,000 for a deal, what would happen is we would pay that person $1,000 for the total capital. And then as long as we have their money in the deal, they're getting 10% annualized interest on that money. We usually put our investors either first or second position liens. And so for folks that don't know what that is, first position, basically if I got hit by a bus or my wife and I and my father-in-law all got hit by buses and you needed to foreclose on the property, the first position lien gets paid first when they sell it. And then the second position lien gets paid after that. That's kind of how we structure it.
10 and 1, 10 is the annualized return. That's your annualized return, right? So if you
Correct.
held it for 6 months, they'd be getting
$5,000.
$5,000 on their money. And then 1% is whatever is they're getting a fee of one point based on the money that they lend. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so if somebody's looking to start and do kind of what we're doing and you're wanting to get the finance side set up, first thing you do, you get with a local bank. They're usually the easiest to work with on stuff like this. And the keywords that you want to find is a portfolio lender. So you want a bank that's lending its own funds, that's not going to sell your loans on the secondary market. And so what that means is like, think back to 2008 mortgage crisis, right? What was happening? All these banks were making these loans, packaging them up into mortgage-backed securities and selling them on the secondary market. Since 2008, that's gotten a lot more strict, right? And so in order for a loan to get sold on the secondary market, it usually has to be kind of commonly called conventional financing. But with a portfolio lender, they basically get to make their own rules. And so like our real bank, like not like a hard money lender, has closed loans for us in little as 7 days in Waco. They're usually a lot more understanding and okay with you having somebody in a second position lien on the property and stuff like that. Get with a local bank and then get with a lawyer to have them draw up your documents. And then once you've gotten with a lawyer, it's just change the name, change the address, and change those types of things. So you don't have to keep going back to him to draw up your documents every time, but do it right the first time, then you don't have to worry about it.
You guys don't work any with hard money?
We haven't had to yet.
Because your banks are so quick?
Banks are so quick. And I mean, truly, it was maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was like, man, I think we might start outrunning our private money. Like we're really buying a lot right now. And I mean, God dropped stuff out of the sky for us. It's like, it's insane. The kind of the
One
blessing that we've kind of experienced at this point.
one thing I've experienced in this doing this a little bit is that you can be good at the money and you can be good at the finances and running a pro forma. But one thing that I'm not the best at, but my partner is the design and determining what needs to be done to this property in order to justify a sale price or a rent price or an Airbnb nightly price. So who on your team, whenever you buy a house, is looking at it and saying, we're going to do this here, drawing up a construction budget, designing it? Is that you? Are you flying down to Waco and walking it with a pen and paper, or how's that happening?
Well, that's my wife. She's interior architect. And I mean, you think stereotypical, like, who do you want designing a house? It's my beautiful wife, 26 years old, knows what style is. Like, I couldn't pick out paint colors to save my life, but she's got that thing down to a science. And I mean, once you've done like a dozen houses like we have, you kind of have built up a portfolio and understand your materials and know what you like. And so she will typically stick to a couple of different base designs, but then pick different things to tweak each property and make it a little bit more unique. So we're not doing like super cookie cutter flips. There's folks out there that will be like, we're doing flip A, and this is everything you're buying for this house. Go to Lowe's or go to Home Depot and get it. So we're definitely taking a little bit more time to customize each house and each property. But she'll fly down there for maybe a week or 2 weeks every month or month and a half or so to handle that stuff. But my father-in-law has also kind of got the eye in a little bit, so he can FaceTime her in and she can pick out stuff based off of that and that kind of thing. But no, that's a huge amount of work. That's something I think that a lot of folks don't realize is like, it doesn't get put in there unless you say it's getting put in there. And so it's a ton of work. And so I'm super thankful, and we're really blessed that my wife loves it. And one, she likes it, but two, she's really, really good at it, which is super helpful.
That's awesome, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you got to have that, or you start cutting corners and you start losing profit.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Tyler, I have two questions for you before we get out of here today. One is just kind of, we don't really do a fire round, but sometimes I see random stuff on the internet. I'm like, you know what? That would make a great question to ask my next guest. So I have two random questions to ask you. One is, what is something that you changed your mind recently on? Like, what is something you've changed your mind about in the last 12 months?
I mean, I think it's saying no to stuff, like refusing to go chase down rabbit holes for deals that would probably make us a lot of money, but would take us away from our focus. I know, Ellis, me and you randomly connected on a deal that we were actually working, and we were looking at buying a resort outside of Austin. That one was like right at the edge of our, like, man, it's 2 hours away from Waco. This would still work inside of our like theory, like our thesis of like staying pretty hyper local. But it's a slightly different asset class. It was like a 24 cabins and a lake house. And I mean, a really big deal for us at the time. Right. And that thing went up in flames. So we didn't close on it. A bunch of stuff fell out at the last minute, as things do with the financing. After that, I was like, man, I was like, I hope we didn't blow that. And I hope that that wasn't something that we really should have closed. And truly, like an answer to prayer, the next day we bought a house in Waco that we're turning into an Airbnb, that because of our percentage stake of GP in that deal, we're probably going to make more money on this Airbnb in Waco. You know, for us, it's just really saying no to looking at every single deal that comes across my desk, because I just get so many of them at this point on all the lists I'm on. It's so
such
difficult.
A good word, man. Leading, we lead, Kingdom REI also has a coaching component and element to what we do now. And so I see a lot of stuff that kind of early investors are coming in at. And, though I was like, Ellis, do you have a connection to, like, I'm not gonna say the guy's name, but he asked me, do I have a connection on a business consultant who could help him look at like an auctioneer company? And because it had a self-storage facility on it, I'm like, why? Like, stop. Like, no, I'm not. I barely even wanted to give him anyone, because I think it's like that idea of like, man, until you really build, especially as an early entrepreneur, until you're insanely profitable at one thing, say no to everything else. And so I think it's a really good word, man.
It's really scary though, because you're not sure where your next deal is going to come.
Yeah.
That's something at the beginning, like when we were getting off the ground, it was like, man, like, I don't know if we're going to get another house for another 6 months. Like, is that going to actually happen? And so you see a deal come across, and when you're starving, anything looks like a steak. For us, I think that was another really good stretching thing for our faith, was like God's told us, like, we're really convinced right now that Waco, Texas, single family real estate, like that's where we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be doing in this season. And God has been really gracious with us and given us a lot of confirmation of that. But I don't know if that really happens for everyone, right? And sometimes like God just has to have you go through that desert of just dryness in order to kind of build up a faith and prepare you for something bigger. But it's really hard when you're in there. It's super easy being on a podcast and talking about it. But I mean, a year ago, we hadn't bought anything, right? We were still trying to get our foot in the door. We're just really thankful and blessed that God's been faithful to do what he said he was going to do. So
that's awesome, man. Dude, my last question, I'll pass over to Cameron, is I saw this on Twitter. By the way, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I just post some random stuff. So like, shout out to my Twitter account. I think it's highly entertaining, by the way. Okay. So anyways, to my question that I got off Twitter is, if you were wildly successful in your business, what would the world look like in 7 to 9 years?
So I would love, there's a really cool program with the military called Skill Bridge. And what they do is they'll give active duty service members 6 months of free internship time. You ought to look into this, Ellis, if you're needing interns for your business. It's incredible. They'll get paid 6 months of their full active duty salary. The business is not allowed to pay them by law. And they'll get 6 months worth of time to explore business, do an internship, and then kind of prepares them basically to exit active duty with a skill set, right? And so in 7 years' time, man, I would love to really own a pretty sizable chunk of Waco, Texas, and have the ability in the deal flow to bring on a significant number of SkillBridge folks. And one, they learn a ton about real estate, but two, I think tangentially, they'll learn a ton about the nonprofit space, ton of stuff about Unbound, and give us a chance to really kind of love on those folks. And I mean, like grunts, like infantry dudes are super near and dear to my heart, right? And a lot of my guys didn't necessarily come from like super well-off backgrounds with tons of access to stuff like that you would like to have, right? Like you would like to give your own kids. And I think we're all probably working towards that kind of direction. And so giving an opportunity like that to folks that are go-getters, but they just need kind of like a kick in the pants, or just somebody who's done it before to show them how it works. Yeah, in 7 years, I'd like to really be cooking with some serious gas down in Waco and being able to keep maybe 5 or 6 interns at a time real busy.
What was that program called again?
It's called Skill Bridge.
Go find me some grunts, Cameron, for
That's right.
this summer.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Hey, Tyler, I'm just curious too, man. You're active duty military. Is there a plan to end that service in that part of your life and do this full time, or what's that look like? How are you balancing the two?
Yeah,
so a lot of people's problems is, I work full-time job. How could I possibly be successful in real estate? Well, I think you're a perfect example. You work full-time job, but your job's a little bit more demanding on what you can and can't do, I think, as far as even where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. I woke up at 4 a.m. every day for about 10 months. So you don't get to just take shortcuts, and you have to be willing to sacrifice something to get where you're going on those fronts. And so one, I mean, like full stop, like none of this happens if God didn't bless it. Like I'm convinced of that at this point. There's no way we would be doing what we're doing if God wasn't like giving us the green light. I mean, I got up at 4 a.m. every day and didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I was doing something, and I was making movement forward every step of the way. And I'm in a unique place in the military right now where I'm getting a master's degree. And so my schedule is set by myself for these past 2 years, but we're really getting ready to transition into a position where I'm not going to have as much time freedom as I had previously, but we kind of knew that from the get-go. And so we've designed the business around really understanding the tasks that need to happen and being able to delegate those tasks to folks that aren't time sensitive if they need to be. And if they are time sensitive, we have somebody who's full-time able to answer those kinds of questions. when it comes to like working a full-time job and starting something like this, I think you have to make sacrifices. I mean, you got 24 hours in a day, and I don't think I could have kept up the 4 a.m. grind much longer than I did. But because I did that, I'm not going to have to do that 4 a.m. grind in 6 months now, because I have those systems in place, and we'll have more full-time help that we're getting ready to hire here soon as well to take care of that stuff. So
Sacrifice, just doing what it takes. I mean, kind of rolling with
joining
the
a
punches.
mastermind. I joined the
Yeah.
War Room Mastermind, which is a military real estate investor one. But
Cool.
I mean, Ellis, what you guys have going on with Kingdom REI, like that's a huge benefit. Getting to see kind of what's the world of possible is a huge deal, I think. So
Yeah,
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing.
yeah, we're waiting on you to join, brothers. Memberships are opening up again soon. Now, I've heard great things about War Room. Actually, one of my partners who's in the military is in War Room, and I know that to be a fantastic one. But speaking of mastermind, for those who are looking for a mastermind specifically for kingdom-minded investors in the real estate space, Kingdom REI has been incredibly powerful. Cameron can speak to that. It is an ecosystem. We actually don't talk about it much here because we do an ad before this, and I have a webinar and stuff. But guys, literally, I mean, we've built a community of over 40 people across the country and doing deals together. I mean, if you're serious about what Tyler's talking about and actually growing a portfolio, and you need a community that has resources and access to capital and deals, that's what we've been building over the last 3 years. So reach out to us if interested in that. Go to oneconnectionaway.com actually is where we have a webinar coming up. So but before we get out of here, Tyler, I want to give you a chance, man. I love what you're doing. Clearly you're working with more investors, or maybe people who hear your story like, man, I like this guy, I want to take a bet on this dude. Where would they go?
yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, on Instagram, that kind of stuff. My email is just tyler@ltginvestments.com if you want to reach out to me there. Yeah, I'd love to talk. And I mean, truly, like what I've found, like for folks out there that are trying to raise money and trying to get money for deals, like, man, just don't pitch people. Don't like ask them for their money. Like just meet people, like, and build connections, kind of like what we're doing right now. And if folks need that opportunity, like just pray that God brings it to you, and do the work of meeting with people. And so I'd love to talk to anybody that's got an interest in this stuff, especially with Unbound and all that stuff. If you want to get involved with that, that's really the main mission here. You just go to unboundnow.org and you can give directly to those folks. And so that would be awesome.
Tyler, thank you, brother. Cameron, really enjoyed this episode as always, man. Big takeaways for you today?
For me, a big takeaway is give Waco a second chance.
Yeah, or maybe don't. It's pretty competitive. So maybe another Central Texas market.
Another tertiary market, Abilene,
Oh, you
Texas.
say give Waco a second chance? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I've never even been to Waco. I wouldn't even be able to find that on a map, to be honest with you. So
When you get there, you'll know it because you'll be stuck.
Hey, they're getting close to finishing I-35 down. They're widening it. It'll be another 10 years.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
So, all right, guys, listen, if you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have, all we ask is that you take a screenshot, share this on the internet, and say, man, this was the best show I listened to all week. Go check this out at the Kingdom REI podcast, the only place to really hear kingdom-minded entrepreneurs, investors really sharing their stories, experience. Tyler, you shared some awesome content today, man. Just laid out exactly what it takes to be able to create a profitable business. So thank you for that, brother. Thank you more for your partnership in the kingdom and using your business, man, as a means to honor God and help others, brother. We're grateful for you.
Thanks for having me on. It was really, really great getting to talk to y'all. And Cameron, good meeting you. And Ellis, good officially meeting you, man. We've passed in the hallway 50 times now, it seems like.
The LinkedIn hallway.
Yep.
It's a good hallway. It's wide.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.